He was quiet. He was respectful. He even trimmed the hedges the HOA complained about. But when their self-declared cops slammed my brother's head into the side mirror of our truck, I only said one thing. You just hit a Marine. And I hope for your sake he doesn't remember how to handle people like you. Because if he does, there won't be a board meeting big enough to save you. It started with a clipboard. A laminated badge no one authorized and a golf cart with a flashing light duct taped to the roof. Brent, the so-called HOA security officer, patrolled our neighborhood like he was training for a mall cop reboot. The kind of guy who quoted HOA bylaws louder than church bells and thought owning a reflective vest gave him legal authority. The first time I saw him, he was arguing with a kid for selling lemonade without an event permit. The second time, he was trying to write up a fine because someone's wind chimes interfered with neighborhood acoustics. That was the day my brother moved back in. Ryan didn't come home with ceremony. He didn't even bring a duffel bag. Just his old military truck, a quiet stare, and a folded American flag in the passenger seat. He had been through something, but he didn't speak about it. What I knew was that the VA had cleared him for civilian return, and he needed time to rest. My parents were out of state, and I had the house to myself. It made sense for Ryan to stay. It was supposed to be simple, quiet, peaceful. And it was, until Brent decided the truck was a threat to community harmony. The first notice was slipped under our front door. Violation, non-conforming vehicle design. I read it out loud at breakfast, and Ryan didn't even blink. He poured his coffee, sat down, and said, "That's code for it looks like something scary." I laughed. Ryan didn't. He never really laughed anymore. The truck had a matte military paint job, some dents, and a Marine Corps decal on the tailgate. To me, it looked like America. To Brent, apparently it looked like terrorism. The next few days, Brent made us his personal project. He'd park his golf cart outside our home like he was staking out a drug lab. He took photos of the truck, paced the sidewalk, and even knocked one morning just to hand Ryan a printed packet of bylaws, all highlighted. Ryan read them in silence, handed them back, and said, "If you have an actual legal document from the county, we can talk." Brent's eyes lit up like he'd been challenged to a duel. He stood on our porch with puffed-up authority and said, "I am the document." That's when I knew we were going to have a problem. Ryan still didn't engage. He kept jogging early in the mornings, spent time rewiring the truck's tail lights, helped a neighbor lift lumber for a backyard project, and made no noise, no fuss, and no complaint. But I saw it building behind his calm. Brent started getting bolder. He issued us 3 more violations, once for intimidating vehicle posture, whatever that meant, and once for excessive stoicism displayed outdoors. I wish I were kidding. The neighborhood wasn't on Brent's side, not really. But most people stayed quiet. It's easier to ignore a lunatic in a vest than challenge one. I kept asking Ryan if he wanted to go to the board, file something formal, get a lawyer. He'd just say, "I'm not here to start trouble. I'm just here to finish healing." He never said what had broken him. Then came Thursday. I was inside working when I heard yelling. At first I thought it was coming from the street, someone's dog, maybe a landscaper arguing about fence lines. Then I heard the words clear as day. "Move the damn truck or I'll move it for you." I ran to the front door and threw it open. Ryan was standing beside the truck in our driveway, shirt damp with sweat from his morning jog. Brent was in his ridiculous vest, face red, clipboard thrown to the ground, hand gripping Ryan's shoulder. Ryan didn't even flinch. I could see Brent's spit flying as he shouted, "You think your little vet sticker makes you above the rules? You think that badge you used to wear gives you parking immunity?" Ryan didn't say a word. He just turned to get into the truck. That's when Brent lost it. He grabbed Ryan's shoulder again, yanked him backward, and in one sharp, furious motion, slammed his head into the truck's side mirror. It wasn't a scuffle. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. The crack echoed across the yard, metal on skull, mirrors shaking like it had been punched by a sledgehammer. Time froze. For a second, I didn't believe what I was seeing. Ryan stumbled back, hand at his temple, blood dripping between his fingers. But his face didn't twist in pain or fury. It was something else. A switch flipping. A calculation forming. Like something deep in his training just woke up. I rushed to him, heart racing, fists clenched. Are you okay? Should I call someone? We need to report. But Ryan stopped me with one word. No. He stepped away, standing tall, blood running down the side of his face. His voice was low. Calm. I'll handle it. Brent stood there, panting like he just wrestled a wild hog, looking proud of himself. Should have moved it when I said, he muttered. Then he looked at me. And maybe next time, keep your brother on a leash. I looked him dead in the eye and said, You just hit a Marine, Brent. And I hope you enjoyed your little moment of power. Because you just lit a fuse you're not ready to burn on. Ryan walked inside and didn't say another word for the rest of the day. He cleaned the cut, poured himself a glass of water, and sat on the back porch like nothing had happened. But I knew something had changed. Something deep. Something final. I didn't know exactly what he was planning. But I knew one thing for sure. Brent had no idea what was coming. The next morning started like nothing had happened, which in itself was unnerving. Ryan was already outside, rolling under the truck with a socket wrench and a rag over his shoulder, humming low like he did before deployments. It wasn't cheerful. It was measured. Focused. Like his mind was already 5 moves ahead. I brought him coffee, but he didn't say much. Just nodded and went back under. I kept staring at the bruise that bloomed over his temple like a slow thundercloud, and a crust of dried blood he hadn't completely washed out of his hair. But if it hurt, he didn't show it. The quiet was worse than shouting. By noon, he had made 3 phone calls. He didn't tell me to whom, and I didn't ask, but one of them ended with the phrase, Civil Review Panel. Another ended with, You'll want to see the security footage. I pieced together that Ryan had pulled the footage from our neighbor's Nest Cam across the street. Brent, in his eagerness to assert himself as king of the HOA, had apparently forgotten that suburban homes now record more angles than a police precinct. I wanted to believe justice would be as simple as handing that over and watching Brent get dragged out in handcuffs, but I knew Ryan wasn't done. That was just step 1. The neighborhood hadn't quite caught wind of the incident yet, but it didn't take long. Mrs. Delaney, the retired schoolteacher who lived on the corner, stopped by with banana bread and carefully phrased concern. I saw Brent storming up the sidewalk yesterday, and your brother looked, well, a little roughed up this morning. Is everything okay? I thanked her for the bread and assured her Ryan was fine. But the story was spreading in pieces, like smoke leaking through a house before the fire alarms blare. Later that afternoon, Brent returned. Not to apologize. Not to check in. No, he came back with 2 HOA board members, clipboard in hand, and a smug look that made my palms itch. They didn't walk up the driveway. They stood at the sidewalk like it was a police perimeter. Brent raised his voice just enough so it could carry over the lawn. We're here to issue a final warning. Vehicle violations have not been addressed. Non-compliance will be escalated. Ryan stepped out onto the porch with a towel over his shoulder and a water bottle in hand. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look tense. He just looked at them with that same unreadable calm. I'm in compliance. This is private property. Take your clipboard and try somewhere else. Brent puffed up. Assaulting an HOA officer is a federal crime. I could press charges for obstruction. Ryan blinked once. Slowly. Then he said, Press them. Please do. And that was it. He turned and went back inside, leaving the 3 of them standing there in awkward silence. The board members looked at Brent like they had just realized they were on the wrong side of a chess game they didn't understand. They left shortly after, with Brent grumbling under his breath and glancing back like he expected Ryan to throw a grenade over the porch railing. That night, Ryan met with a man named Nate. Ex-Marine, built like a fridge with legs, and wore sunglasses after sunset. They sat in the garage and talked low, voices barely audible over the hum of the streetlights and crickets. I didn't know what they were planning, but I caught bits and pieces. Terms like legal escalation, vet harassment, and improper jurisdiction floated through the air like cold warnings. Nate left with a flash drive and a handshake. Ryan said nothing. The next morning, a plain white envelope arrived on our doorstep. No return address. Inside was a formal letter from a local VA attorney, notifying us that a complaint had been accepted and a legal advocate assigned. Ryan read it over cereal, said, "Good," and went back to eating like he just confirmed a delivery. By day 3, things were shifting. Our neighbor Harold, a Vietnam vet who kept to himself, rolled up in his scooter and parked under the shade tree in our yard. He had seen the footage too. "That boy Brent," he said, shaking his head, "been playing soldier with no war to fight. Until now." He told us how Brent had fined him last year for hanging a flag on Memorial Day. Called it unauthorized display. Harold had filed a complaint and got ignored. "But your brother?" he said with a nod. "Your brother's going to make this one count." That night, Brent posted on the neighborhood Facebook group. It was a wall of text, badly punctuated, full of dramatic statements like violent confrontation, unstable veteran, and dangerous individuals creating a hostile environment. He included a blurry photo of Ryan from behind, mid-jog, and called it evidence of suspicious behavior. It was pathetic. And desperate. And it made everything worse. The next 24 hours were chaos. Neighbors started talking, loudly. Someone dug up an old complaint Brent had filed against a family for hosting a 4th of July barbecue. Another neighbor posted a photo of Brent in their backyard last year with the caption, "Uninvited and unwelcome." Suddenly, the Facebook thread was a battleground. People were no longer just annoyed, they were angry. A petition formed. Calls were made. Ryan didn't engage in any of it. He just watched from the porch with his arms folded, waiting. Then came the surprise that even I didn't expect. A local journalist showed up at our door. He had heard about the video. About the Marine. About the HOA cop with delusions of authority. And apparently, the footage had been leaked. Ryan didn't deny it. He just said, "Everything you need is in the file." He handed over a printout and a USB drive and walked away. The journalist blinked, caught off guard by the efficiency. "He's thorough," he said to me. "And quiet," I added. By the time the article hit the local paper, the neighborhood had already erupted. The headline was brutal. "Marine assaulted by HOA enforcer over legally parked truck." Subheading: "When power goes unchecked, justice parks right next to you." Brent's world was crumbling, but he didn't seem to know it yet. He drove by the house 3 more times that day, slower each time, his ridiculous golf cart quieter than usual. No clipboard. No radio. Just eyes darting behind his sunglasses, trying to calculate how it had all gone so wrong. But the truth was simple. He thought my brother was just another man with a truck. Another quiet vet trying to fit back into the world. He thought silence meant weakness. He didn't realize silence was just the sound before a storm. And the storm had already begun. Ask ChatGPT. Brent didn't come around the next day. Not once. The neighborhood felt noticeably lighter, like someone had opened a window after weeks of suffocating air. But nobody was celebrating yet. Everyone had seen how Brent operated. He was the kind of man who got louder when he started losing. The kind who believed retreat was just the part before a comeback. I knew better. Ryan knew better. And Brent? He was about to learn just how deep the consequences ran when you laid hands on a Marine and thought there'd be no return fire. Around mid-morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of our house. It wasn't police. No sirens, no logos. But the presence was unmistakable. 2 clean-cut men stepped out, wearing subtle suits and carrying leather folders. One walked with a distinct limp. Ryan stood from the porch before they even knocked. They shook hands like they already knew each other. Turns out, one of them had served with Ryan years ago. The other was a legal liaison from a federal veteran support group that specialized in civil cases involving abuse or discrimination against former military members. Ryan invited them inside, and for the next hour, our living room became a quiet war room of facts, files, timelines, and silent nods. I caught bits of the conversation when I passed through with coffee. One sentence stuck with me. The man with the limp said, "We usually take the long route through county courts. But your footage? That puts this into a different league. He didn't just assault you. He did it while falsely claiming authority." The other added, "Impersonating a law enforcement officer, even under the guise of HOA enforcement, carries real weight when it's directed at a protected class." Ryan didn't say much. He rarely did. But his jaw tightened in that way it does when he knows the wind has shifted in his favor. By the afternoon, the article had gone viral beyond our town. Military Facebook groups picked it up. Vet support networks reposted it. One post simply said, "Imagine slamming a Marine's head because of a truck, and thinking no one would notice." Within hours, Brent's name was trending locally, and the HOA's inbox was reportedly flooded with emails demanding his removal. A few of the quieter neighbors came out of the woodwork. They dropped by with handshakes, thanks, and stories of their own. One young father described how Brent told his kids their trampoline would be confiscated as illegal bounce infrastructure. A single mother shared how Brent called animal control on her therapy dog for unapproved tail wagging. Every story came with the same undertone, fear and helplessness, until now. Around 4 that afternoon, Ryan received an official letter by courier. It was from the County Oversight Committee. The language was formal and precise, but the meaning was clear. An investigation had been opened not only into Brent's conduct but into the HOA board for enabling him. They were being reviewed under a new veteran protection statute that included harsh penalties for housing-related discrimination. Ryan folded the letter neatly and placed it on the counter, then went back outside like he hadn't just dropped a legislative bomb on their entire operation. At sunset, Brent returned. No board members. No clipboard. Just him, pacing the sidewalk like a man trying to figure out whether to apologize or double down. He finally called out to Ryan, who was sitting on the tailgate of the truck, shirt off, still wrapping a new bandage around his healing forehead. Brent said, "Look, maybe things got out of hand. Nobody wants this to become bigger than it is." Ryan didn't even stand. He looked at Brent with that same calm stare he'd carried through all of it, and said, "It's already bigger than it is. You just didn't know it yet." Brent scoffed, forced a laugh, and said, "Come on, man. We're neighbors." Ryan tilted his head slightly. "You assaulted a disabled vet over a parked truck and tried to lie about it on social media. You're not my neighbor. You're a threat to this neighborhood. But don't worry. The right people are handling it now." Brent opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He just stood there, blinking, the weight of the silence crashing down like a gavel. The next day, it was over. Not in some dramatic burst, but in a slow, thorough unraveling. The HOA issued a public statement by email, attempting to distance themselves from Brent. They claimed they had no knowledge of misconduct, and had always operated with fairness and community values. Nobody bought it. Brent's golf cart was stripped of its fake decals and flashing light. The vest disappeared. His name was removed from all communications. But the final blow came from the sheriff's department. A notice was pinned on the community board stating that impersonating a law enforcement officer was under criminal review. Brent's name was listed in the footnotes. That same evening, Ryan was invited to speak at the upcoming HOA meeting. He declined. Instead, he sent a written statement that was read aloud by a volunteer. It detailed his service, his injury, and the events of the past week. It ended with one sentence. "Authority should protect, not provoke, and silence should never be mistaken for submission." They say the meeting ended with applause. And tears. And a vote to restructure the entire HOA leadership team. The week after, our street looked different. Lighter. Like it had exhaled. Kids played again without someone counting decibels. Veterans walked their dogs without being questioned. Flags flew. Lawns went unmowed for a day or two without fear. It wasn't just peace. It was earned peace. And Ryan? He finally smiled again. He never gloated. Never bragged. He just kept living. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun go down over the quiet neighborhood, I asked him if he felt like justice had been served. He sipped his coffee, thought for a moment, and said, "Justice is good. But accountability? That's better. People like Brent never expect to answer to someone who fights quieter than they shout." I laughed and said, "So what now? You gonna run for HOA president?" Ryan looked horrified. "I've had tougher deployments. Let's not get crazy." Somewhere down the street, a new family was moving in. The father waved. The mother smiled. Their son wore a military ball cap that looked suspiciously like Ryan's. As we waved back, Ryan leaned over and muttered, "Let's make sure they get the good kind of welcome." I nodded. Because now, finally, this neighborhood belonged to its people again. And the silence that followed wasn't tension. It was peace. The kind you earn. Ask ChatGPT.